Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on our podcast. She's running for office in Seattle. Her name is ChrisTiana ObeySumner. So welcome to the podcast, ChrisTiana.
Thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you. If you could get started by giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Yeah, so I've been civically engaged throughout my entire life. My grandma was a Black Panther. My mom was someone who really fought for disability justice even before, it was a real thing, the same principles. And there's a lot of family who is very, anti-establishment, anti-capitalist sort of people. And especially as a Black, Indigenous, autistic, emotionally disabled, autistic, and ace and non-binary person, I was, had to advocate for myself through public school. Being born in the mid-'80s, I did not get the benefit of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was only passed in the '90s. And so having to really fight for, education plans that was for autistic folks, that also addressed racial bias in the classroom. I also throughout my life, have been unhoused or unstably housed for the lion's share at the beginning. We started at age 8, and it lasted until about age 25, age 28. And so about 20 years of my life. And so that has led to everything from a school to institutionalization pipeline to literal homelessness, a former sex worker, survival sex worker. So there's a lot of that sort of lived experience that as I started going into a space where I, start a career and, going to school, which I was really excited to do. I didn't think that would be a possibility for me. I was able to start to take that wisdom of lived experience and couple it with, the knowledge of the policies and the systems, and, my background is in social psychology and social policy. So being able to weave that together, and that led to me being able to build a toolkit. It's been really successful that I've used throughout my policy advocacy and social equity consulting business. We operate as a co-op, or the name of our business is Epiphanies of Equity. And we've worked with over 250 businesses, governments, and organizations across the country. Of course, a lot of it concentrated here in Seattle, in the sort of Pacific, the West Coast. But in that, being able since 2018, to practice what it looks like to weave together knowledge and wisdom of actual ground reality and lived experience. And so I had ran for a transparency seat in 2017. At the time, my career was being a direct social service worker, working towards becoming a licensed mental health counselor. And I was working in the local public hospital, and I just saw between what they call that intergovernmental relationship between what the government says or the policies or the grant requirements is, and then how people are actually supposed to do it and get their work done. It was so much inequity. I ran for what they call a transparency seat, which is when our mayor got kicked out and the city council president had to take over, and so there was this open seat on city council, and so anyone in the community could run. And I came in second. And ever since, people have been asking me, run for office, every 2 years. And I've just been I'm the policy wonk. I'm the strategist. I'm the behind-the-scenes person more so, right? Even, there's other work that I've done. But this year, the person who was the incumbent, they decided they're not going to run again. So I threw my hat in the ring, and I didn't know I was going to make it through the primary, but I did. And so now I'm here in the general, and about 24 days left to see what happens.
All right. So can you tell our audience what office in particular you're seeking right now?
Yeah, I'm running for Seattle City Council District 5. Seattle City Council districts are somewhat new.
Okay.
They broke the city, the official city borders up into 7 districts, I believe.
All right.
And so District 5 is what's it called, North Seattle. So it's the northernmost tip. If you're in Seattle, it'd be from everywhere from North 85th Street. And it's the largest district. It's a district that's really interesting because it would be considered, quote unquote, the suburbs.
Oh.
But it's not really. It's one of those districts where, when I was thinking about running, we drove along that North 85th Street border, and then at the top of the district, which, goes to another city, along the 145th Street border. And what me and my partner noticed is when you start at, because there's like Lake Washington, and there's 2 lakes on either side. So when you start from one coast, it's like these huge, like mansions, like my partner's calling them like estates, right? These huge estates. And then as you start to go, there's like these main thoroughfares, like there's First 15th Avenue Northwest, and you see some like more middle class houses. And then there's Greenwood, which is where I'm at, and that's sort of both like a mixture of apartments, condos, and some single family homes. That's where you start seeing public transit really start up again, things like that. And then you go to Aurora. Aurora is where like the sex worker strip is. It's where like, a lot of supportive housing is. It's a state highway. There's not really a lot of like actual housing along Aurora Avenue because people just see it as like a commercial district, but but like all the hotels and motels on Aurora Avenue, like unhoused folks are living in them. Then you go to the next one, which is Northgate, which they just put a huge light rail station, and I think they're trying to like reimagine it, but Northgate originally had been like more working class homes and apartments. Then you go to Lake City, and Lake City is, I think, the most diverse community in the district, and that's going to be primarily apartments under-resourced folks, elders, disabled folks, and then you start getting to the coast again, and then the big houses show up. So it's this really interesting thing that I explain that because a lot of folks see District 5 and they just think, oh, well, the only people up in District 5 are wealthy, white, maybe retired homeowners that they just are mad because they just want more sidewalks so they can pay for it themselves. And they're not thinking about all the folks here who are unhoused, who are students, who are renters, who are in social or tax credit housing or permanent supportive housing, transit riders. There's no sidewalks up here, so disabled folks can't really get around. We have one of the highest pedestrian collisions and deaths zones in the city. We are being quickly deforested and losing our tree canopy at a quick clip. And so there's a lot of folks up here who, people of the low majority too, which I think is important to say. So there's a lot of folks up here who just doesn't meet that stereotype. And so one of the things that really encouraged me to run is to show folks, like, we're out here and we need investments from the city. And the more the city just thinks that everyone up in North Seattle is just a suburbia with all these rich homeowning people, like, then we're not getting the social housing investments. We're not getting the infrastructure investments. Like, we're not getting any cultural centers or cultural funds. Like, we're not getting anything for the majority of the people who are here, but is getting drowned out by the folks who have the privilege of going down to City Hall at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon and giving like a 2-minute public comment when everyone else has childcare or has work or doesn't have transportation. And we just wanting to be someone to amplify those voices.
All right. So what would you say to our audience are the 3 biggest issues of your campaign platform?
Do you want to know my three biggest issues or what people tell me? So there are two different.
That's a good question because that sounds like that's part of the race of running for office is representing other people's views. So I would say probably what are the three biggest issues that people are telling you they want you to address?
So here in Seattle, I feel like everyone is sort of hyper-focused on three main issues, which is public safety, housing, and homelessness.
Okay.
There are some close honorable mentions, I guess I'll say, with public transit investments, that infrastructure investments for like bike lanes and sidewalks, and the economy overall. Because Seattle has a lot of their money comes from like tourism, and like no one was touring during the pandemic.
Sure.
So there's a lot of that. And it's interesting because Seattle has an interesting social psychology. As you remember, I'm a social psychologist by practice. So it's an interesting social psychology here, in that when you talk to people about like their moral beliefs and their like their philosophical sort of like values, right? It's very much like, and we should be inclusive, and we should have equal opportunities, and all these different sort of things. Like, it's very much like this. Just to give you an example, Seattle, the city of Seattle as a governance system has a race and social justice initiative in quotes. The county we're in has an equity and social justice initiative. The state of Washington has an office of equity. So there's this huge focus on being equitable, social justice, where everyone's included, all that kind of stuff, and people say it. But then when they talk about what they want to see happen, or they start doing things, it doesn't match. And so,
incongruent.
Yeah, like very. Like, so it's interesting of the biggest, like, I think in all of these different, they all really weave together for me, right? And I try to explain that to people, and they only really see it as discrete issues. So, like, for example, like I said, I used to be in direct social services. And a lot of that was working with folks who either were chronically unhoused or they were becoming unhoused through the hospital, or they were getting treatment at the hospital after being chronically unhoused for so long, whether it's mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment or even just for chronic illnesses or other sort of things. And so if folks are concerned about, like, public safety being the way the people I'm talking to define public safety is their feeling of, like, whether someone's going to, like steal the packages off their step, or is using drugs outside, or is going to break into their car, or is going to yell on the street corner. There are some things like, theft, like burglary as opposed to theft. I would say, like, people driving their car into the pot shop and stealing all the money, so there is some of that too, but then there's also, concerns around sex work, drug dealing, like that kind of stuff is really what they're thinking about with public safety. And there's this huge fight about, like, the police department is just like, well, we just need more money because we have to hire more cops. Because if we have more cops, then we'll be able to do all the things you're asking. Because Seattle asks the police to do everything from, like, what they call the, priority one calls. So, like, there's an active, like someone, like, is literally in a store right now with a gun pointed at a clerk stealing their money. To what they call priority 4 calls, which is like a wellness check, or there's someone who is screaming and crying on a street corner, but they're not doing anything else, right? Yeah. And so they're saying, like, well, this is why our response times are like 7 minutes or 9 minutes, and this is why, we're overworked and we don't have any proactive services, and we just need more cops. And, they're saying, like, in the cops, they just passed this public drug law where, like, oh yeah, if anyone's being seen doing drugs in public, then the cops will just arrest them and put them in jail. And, with people, you're like, well, what about services? And you're like, well, I hear that people, they offer services when they go to the encampment, but they don't accept the services. And when we talk about housing, then they're just like, well, but where's the housing going to do? It could go with housing density because, like, if we put up 4-story buildings, and that's going to cause this issue, and like, how are we going to have the infrastructure to hold it? So let me weave all of this together, because people are seeing all these things in sort of a very Chicken Little sort of way. So, from my experience in doing this work before, here's the issue. Seattle has the smallest apartments in the country. Like, the amount of square feet you get per amount of money, I think the only place that rivals this is San Francisco.
Oh.
I read somewhere that if you were to look at how much square footage of an apartment you can get and only pay 30% of the area median income in this city, which is about $120,000 because it's ridiculous, then you would only be, on average, you're only going to be able to afford just under 600 square feet. Over 75% of all of the rental housing in this city is either a studio or one-bedroom apartment. The average cost of a one-bedroom apartment is somewhere between $1,500 and $1,700 a month, usually plus utilities. The housing market to buy is just completely, that's not even on the table.
Sure.
Our public utility rates are very high. We have an income inequality that's just ridiculous. The top 20% of income earners in the city make 22 times more than the bottom 20% of income earners in the city, or some difference between $400,000 and $18,000.
Wow.
We have there's both a recruitment and attrition issue with the police department as well as social service workers. Now, I went to a forum last night, and one of the places, like one of the bigger public supportive housing spaces in the city, said that their attrition rate went down to like 25%, down from like 40% in the pandemic, which is still a quarter, but okay. But if you look across the social services industry, the attrition rate is still closer to about 40-50%. The average social service worker in the city makes about $55,000 to $60,000 a year, which, remember, the area median income is $120,000, and the average cost of a one-bedroom apartment is around $1,650. So, in order to have even just to qualify with 2.5 times your rent, let alone it being 3 times your rent, you're not going to make enough money to qualify.
Sure.
So we're already at this space, right, where a little bit more. The other issue is we don't have enough shelter beds. When we're building affordable housing, in quotes, people continue to build permanent supportive housing, which can be great, but also it's a single resident occupancy, which means if you are coupled, if you're married, if you have children, you either would have to split up your family or you would have to find another option. We don't have nearly any reliable sort of rental subsidy program or voucher program. And our wait times can be, especially if you're not in that sort of like being literally homeless, going through coordinated entry and then going into permanent supportive housing, like that sort of trek. Outside of that, it could be anywhere from a year to 2 years of a wait, sometimes longer. And so when you're someone who you go outside and you're literally homeless, right, or you're housing unstable, and you're having to navigate this broken system that's under-resourced, understaffed, underpaid, you are having to be outside in the cold, in the rain, walking for miles a day. You don't have anywhere to pee because it's closed down all the public restrooms. You don't have anywhere to sit because they've gotten rid of all the public benches. that we have a social, cultural, and political situation where folks don't even want you to sit in their restaurants. If you set up a tent, you're automatically going to have people come and be mean at you. We don't really have any 24-hour shelters until you have to get in line at 5 o'clock and maybe get a bed, maybe get inside by 8 o'clock, and then you're going to be woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning and kicked back out again. Now, when we're like in a normal, like say, like white-collar office and we have a hard day with our peers, someone's going to stand up with their cubicle and say, hey, let's go to happy hour, so we can establish that when humans are anxious or they have anxiety or they're upset or stressed, that they self-medicate. So imagine having to do that not only for 1 to 2 years to wait for a referral, but you have to be, in order to qualify as chronically or literally homeless to even get the referral and get in the system, you have to be outside in literal homelessness for 365 days continuously or 365 days over the course of 3 years.
Oh.
Okay? Okay. Now, so a person comes to me and they say, what are you going to do about public safety? How are you going to make sure there are people outside using? What do we do about all of the encampments? Well, we have to really look at these upstream solutions, right? We need to address the economic inequality. Seattle has the most regressive tax system in the state, and in Washington State has the most regressive tax system in the country. So even if you are making income, you are always going to be behind. We don't have housing that is affordable, that is accessible for folks with disabilities, because a lot of these are vertical access, either because they're a townhome or because they're just in a building. But we don't have housing for families.
Oh, no.
Less than 10% of our housing stock is a 2-bedroom or more. And we have room standard, occupancy standards, so you can only have 2 people per room legally. So if you're coupled up and you have a child, you're screwed. Like you're going to have to find that housing. We don't have the shelter beds. The shelters are terrifying. The people who refuse shelters say that they would take something like a tiny home village, which is amazing. There's a place here called Nicholasville that has the eco-village model. And on top of that, we have these policies that are being put into place that are criminalizing the fact that people are in a system that's inequitable and is literally setting them up to fail.
Oh, no.
As a result, they don't have access to their survival needs. They are in constant fear and hypervigilant state of survival. And, we are paying over 60% of our city budget on quote unquote public safety to do things like incarcerate them, which costs, in some cases, 3 times more than any other intervention. Oh. If you want to get folks off the street, which no one should be outside, no one. If there's someone outside, we've already failed. We need to give them what they need for basic survival. To give them what they need for basic survival, we need to make sure that we have those resources available. To make sure we have those resources available, we need to make sure that we are having a steady flow of income that's progressive and equitable, that is going to fund everything from social service programs to social housing to rental subsidies to transportation, whatever that might be, transitional housing, whatever. In order to make sure that those investments and those resources are going to be able to be used, we have to pay the staff, not just the social housing staff and nonprofit staff and emergency shelter staff, but also our city workers and our bus drivers,
sure,
and all of these folks who are not being paid enough to even live in the city, even though they work here every day. Because who's going to staff it if we don't have it? And in order to make sure that we do that, we can easily reallocate the services and purview of all this crap we've piled on to the police department, which is like they don't want to do it. Even they don't want to do it. We're all in agreement that SPD is working way outside of their purview, scale, and scope. So how about we just have SPD do only priority 1 calls?
Okay.
Like active person with a gun pointing at a clerk stealing the money. Priority 1 calls, right? And everything else, we reallocate that purview to existing community services that are trying to do this work on a shoestring budget. And then we see what the average cost would be for SPD to provide those services, and we reallocate that portion of the budget. And people keep asking me, are you one of those defund? Are you saying 50%? I don't know how much percent. It could be 25%, it could be 50%, it could be 80%. I don't know. But we've seen data that between 40 and 60% of our 911 calls it could be rerouted. So I don't know. So I lay all of that out to do a couple of things. Number 1, to tell you what the top 3 issues are. Number 2, to kind of give you an insight into what I think some of the issues are, which is deeper, these taproot things. And I think number 3, to show you sort of the way my wonky policy systems mind works. But I think also to show that what we really need in governance right now in policy is to really hold the fact that it's complicated, it's multidimensional, it's messy, it's complex, it's nonlinear, it's historical, and unless we are ready and willing to innovate and to change and to transform and to be risk takers and get into good trouble and try things that haven't been done before and fail forward and really center the lived experience on the ground, the actual reality of the people that need the reparative justice, not our theoretical understanding of it, not some white paper that was written by some PhD that's never experienced any of this in their lives outside of a research component, but actual people who are in that space, amplifying them and their leadership meaningfully, authentically, and embedded into policy process so that we can actually get to where the gaps are and actually see progress and success. And that is really what I feel like has been the biggest issue. If I would have to say across everything I said, people are not saying it explicitly per se, but I think the biggest issue that I believe and what I feel like I'm implicitly hearing from folks is our city council is so busy fighting and arguing and posturing and pontificating that they get caught up in that minutia and they're not focused on progress and they're not focused on moving forward. And people are tired and they're frustrated. And so my entire job every day is to go into organizations in the middle of an equity crisis. And how do you put policies and procedures in place to help everyone to heal and move forward? So I can do that with 250 businesses, governments, and organizations. At the end of the day, I mean, City of Seattle, this would just feel like a one really big client for 4 years. So yeah, that's probably like 4 answers of 4 different questions, but all wrapped into one.
Yes, yeah. You did well at framing these issues as part of a broader system and how they intersect each other and how they all come together in a problem that seems to have endless dimensions to it.
Mm-hmm.
So when's the election?
November 7th.
November 7th is coming up.
And we have mail-in ballots in Seattle, so the ballots are supposed to drop on the 18th.
Okay.
And so
very soon.
So technically election day is between October 18th and November 7th here.
Okay. So since we're getting on the final stretch of your campaign, what can people listening to this podcast do to support you?
I would love if folks, go to votechristiana.com. It has, I will be honest, it could have more of my things. I am such a wonk on this as you're talking about it, but it does have some of my policy platforms on there. It shows if you are in the Seattle area. We have a program here in Seattle called Democracy Voucher Program. Every registered Seattle voter gets $100 assigned to them. That all they have to do is fill out a form of, because it's broken up in $25 increments. So as many of those $25 vouchers up to the 100 that you would be willing to give to the campaign is always amazing.
Oh.
If you're outside of Seattle, people can donate up to $300. I'm not saying you have to donate. You cannot donate more than $300, but I'm saying you can donate up to $300. We have opportunities for volunteering, even in a virtual space, whether that's helping with social media amplification. We're going to start doing phone banking, so that's something that folks can do. Or, reaching out. You can look up ChrisTiana ObeySumner just in the Googles, and if you want to know more about me or the work I do or how I think about issues, there is a lot of me on Google from my work and my advocacy. So that's another thing that if you see that, if that resonates with you, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat. I'm always happy to be in solidarity and camaraderie with folks. If there's anything that I can do while I have this spotlight to amplify certain issues, I am happy to do so. If I can get it past my campaign team who really manage my campaign socials. I'm doing that on the 29th of October if you're in the area. We are having a fundraiser called Burlection. I am a burlesque performer. And so it's going to all be a political burlesque of all of my family, but it's really sort of a soft rally to bring awareness to not only the need for more opportunities and respect for burlesque and drag performers, especially our drag kings, but also that we need more performance stages, we need more support with ticket sales, and we need there to be policy changes so that burlesque productions that are fiscally sponsored can still apply for and receive grant funding and it not be considered sex work, which usually disqualifies burlesque productions as for grant funding. So there's a lot of those. So my hope is with Burlection that it was my first campaign promise to my first endorser, who is Mix Puxa Plenty, who runs the burlesque school that I graduated, Show Them Burlesque Basics with Laurish Leone. And I said, by the end of this, I promise I will give a literal platform to the burlesque community to talk about these issues. And we will on October 29th at the Showbox Seattle. And on the website as of tomorrow afternoon, we will have that ticket link on the site as well.
Okay, good. So again, that website address is ChrisTianaObeySumner.com?
Yes. Or
perfect.
VoteChristiana.com.
ChrisTiana, I'm sorry, I got your name wrong.
Yeah. So
I got it right at the start of the show. But okay, ChrisTianaObeySumner.com.
No, just Vote ChrisTiana. So
okay.
www.vote, and then you spell my name like Christian with an A at the end, so Christiana.com.
Okay.
But if you go to ChrisTianaObeySumner.com, then you get to my consulting business. So I just want to make very sure that I say on the record that this is not me trying to amplify my business for personal gain. So make sure you go to VoteChristiana.com, but do not put in ChrisTianaObeySumner.com unless you are intentionally trying to go to my business.
Okay.
I have to say that publicly.
Okay. No worries. I plan to put the Vote ChrisTiana in the show notes, so whoever's reading the show notes can go there to where you want them to go.
Yeah. Because you're not supposed to.
Perfect.
Public games, yeah.
All right. So your campaign is almost ending. We want to wish you best of luck in the final weeks of your campaign.
Thank you.
And may you get out of it what you want to get out of it.
That has been my motto the whole time. It's like no matter what happens, I have just been sort of saying to myself, I just want to be on the path that is the path I need to be on to fulfill my life's mission and do, bring liberation for all sentient beings. And so the more I'm on this path, the more I guess this is what I'm supposed to do.
Exactly, yep. You can't put it better than that.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
We're glad to have you. Thanks for coming on the podcast, and we wish you all the best in your campaign and everything else you do.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
You too.